I knew my life was over the day they came for me. The Emperor's warriors descended on our hive like a storm of gold and steel, their armor shining under the harsh lights of industry. They did not speak of glory nor of honor. Their only word was duty. No one asked if we wanted to go. In the Imperium, wanting doesn't matter. Service is the only reason you exist. I was taken with 30 other boys from the endless gang wars of Hive Secundus. My last memory of home was the towering, rust-stained spires stretching up toward a sky I had never truly seen. The air was thick with smoke, choking us since birth. The constant thrum of machinery was the lullaby we grew up with. None of it was beautiful, but it was mine, and I knew I would never see it again. The transport ship swallowed us whole. We sat in silence, too afraid to speak under the gaze of the warrior who guarded us. His armor was blood red, heavy with symbols of death and faith. His helm was a skull made of iron, blank and unfeeling. We had heard stories of the Emperor's angels, but nothing had prepared us for their sheer presence. Even standing still, he seemed like the embodiment of war itself. When he finally spoke, his voice was mechanical, carried through the vox of his helmet. You are not chosen for greatness. You are raw material. Most of you will die. Those who survive will serve until death claims you. There was no promise of honor, no promise of power, only endless service and likely death. I looked at the others. Some were still boys, gaunt and wide-eyed. Others, like me, had been hardened by years of fighting in the hive gangs. Whatever our pasts, in that moment we shared only fear. Not that anyone dared admit it. The journey lasted a week, though time lost all meaning in the belly of the ship. We were fed once a day, thick, tasteless gruel that filled our stomachs more than anything we'd known in the underhive. We relieved ourselves under the blank stares of servitors. We slept huddled together on the metal floor. The Marine never moved, never ate, never slept. He was a statue of war, standing eternal. On the 7th day, the ship shuddered. The ramp opened, flooding us with blinding light. Herded out, we stumbled into a world none of us could have imagined. Mountains rose into the clouds. Forests stretched across valleys. The air was so clean it hurt to breathe. And above it all, carved into the heart of the mountain, loomed the fortress monastery, a monument to human dominance. The Marine finally removed his helm. His pale, scarred face looked carved from stone. His eyes cut through us, merciless, yet holding something I couldn't name. Maybe it was memory. Maybe once he too had stood here, just another frightened boy. I am Brother Sergeant Crastus, he said. From this moment, your past is gone. Your names are gone. You belong to the chapter, and through it, to the Emperor. Another figure emerged from the fortress, this one in white robes instead of armor. His head was shaven, his face marked with scars and machinery. One eye glowed red as it whirred and focused on us. I am Apothecary Varn, he said. You will now be tested. Those who pass will begin the transformation. Those who fail will still serve the Emperor, just not as Astartes. The meaning was clear. Survive or be discarded. Nothing in the Imperium is wasted, least of all a human life. Those who failed the tests would not be freed. At best, they would become servitors, their minds erased, their bodies rebuilt with crude machinery, condemned to live as little more than tools. We were marched through colossal, adamantium gates into the heart of the fortress monastery. The halls were vast, wide enough for armored giants to walk side by side. High ceilings loomed above, carved with endless skulls, symbols of faith, and the chapter's sacred emblems. Servitors shuffled past us, flesh-bound to clumsy implants, their deadened stares only briefly flicking toward us. Human serfs hurried by, always with eyes lowered, as if afraid to be noticed. The examination chamber was a place of cold precision. Its walls were tiled white. Those centuries of blood had stained them beyond cleaning. Rows of restraints lined the surgical tables, and the walls bristled with instruments, some familiar, others alien and nightmarish. Strip, Apothecary Varn commanded. His tone left no room for hesitation. We obeyed. In the underhive, nakedness meant weakness, but here disobedience meant death. Our filthy rags, the last remnants of our past lives, were discarded at our feet. We stood shivering, exposed under the harsh light. The examinations were brutal and dehumanizing. They poked and prodded every part of us, drew our blood, scraped our skin, tested our reflexes, cataloged our flaws. Varn and his aides spoke of us as though we were nothing more than cattle. Subject 17. Exceptional bone density. Subject 23. Heavy lung scarring. Likely from hive pollution. Recommend enhanced replacement. Subject 8. Malnourished. Skeletal development compromised. Rejected. One by one, we were reduced to numbers, to statistics. No longer men, only raw material. 3 boys were pulled aside, unfit for the process. Their faces showed a mix of relief and shame. They thought their lives had been spared. I never saw them again. When it was done, we were issued identical gray robes and led to a dormitory. Rows of narrow cots stretched across the room, each with a single thin blanket. Nothing else. No decorations, no possessions. A servitor stood by the entrance, wires jutting from its ruined flesh. Sleep, it droned, voice flat and mechanical. Tomorrow, you begin to die. I lay on the cot, unsettled by the strange softness beneath me. Around me, some of the others cried quietly into their blankets. Others just stared into the dark, empty-eyed. No one spoke. What was there to say? We had been chosen for what? To become living weapons for a god we had never seen? Or simply to die in the attempt? I thought of my old gang in the Underhive. We called ourselves the Blood Scorpions, though there was nothing noble about us. We fought and bled for scraps, for patches of rusted ground no sane person would want. It had been a pointless struggle, but at least it had been ours. A brotherhood, forged in misery. Here, we were no brothers. We were rivals. Only the strongest would live. Sleep took me slowly, and with it came a bitter kind of calm. I had survived 18 years in the Underhive, where most never saw their 10th. I had killed my first man at 12, clawed my way up the ranks of the Scorpions through violence and cunning. If anyone could survive this ordeal, surely it was me. I was wrong. Tiber Jorel, the boy I had been, was already dead. For a space marine is not a greater man. He is something altogether different. Something both more and less than human. Morning came with a scream of klaxons. We had 5 minutes to wash and relieve ourselves in a communal hall with no privacy. Then we were herded into a massive dining chamber. Space Marines sat at raised tables, devouring impossible quantities of food with mechanical precision. We, the aspirants, were directed to lower benches, where bowls of tasteless nutrient porridge awaited. Eat quickly, a chapter serf ordered. You have 10 minutes. The porridge before us was tasteless but heavy, designed only to sustain, not to please. As I forced it down, I studied the hall. Its walls were lined with trophies of war, alien remains preserved in stasis, shattered weapons displayed like relics of faith. Above all of it hung a colossal Aquila, the 2-headed eagle of the Imperium, its wings stretching across the ceiling like a judgment. Before the meal was finished, Brother Sergeant Crastus entered. His presence alone silenced the entire room. Today, he declared, you begin to be remade. Your bodies are frail. Your minds untested. Some of you will not survive even the training required before implantation. That is the point. Only the worthy will receive the Emperor's gift. We were marched to an open courtyard enclosed by the fortress walls. The morning air was sharp and cold, each breath turning to mist. Mountains rose in every direction, their peaks crowned with snow. Run, Crastus commanded, pointing toward a winding path that cut into the mountainside. Fail to finish by midday, and you do not eat. Fail again tomorrow, and you will never eat again. Fail a third time, and you will be removed. The path climbed relentlessly, vanishing into the treeline. We had no sense of its true distance, only that it stretched for kilometers. None of us, raised in the cramped tunnels of the hive, had ever run so far. Still, we ran. At first, the pace seemed manageable, but the incline, the thinning air, and the sheer length soon broke us apart. By the first kilometer, the pack had scattered. The strong surged forward. The weak stumbled behind. I ran in the middle, my body hardened by gang life. But my lungs burned with every clean breath of mountain air. The path twisted through dark forests where roots clawed at our feet, then broke onto cliffs where a single mistake meant a fall into nothing. Servitor skulls hovered above, watching, recording, reporting. Time became meaningless. The sun climbed higher, scorching us. My robe clung to me with sweat, my feet blistered and raw. Still, I pushed forward. Each step became its own battle. I told myself it was no different than life in the Underhive, another trial. Another test of endurance. At last, I staggered back into the courtyard. The sun hung overhead, marking midday. I had survived barely. Out of 27 aspirants, only 18 made it back in time. The others arrived later, hollow-eyed, knowing their punishment was hunger. One boy never returned at all. No one spoke his name. Failure was final. The next morning, we ran again, this time with weighted packs strapped to our backs. The day after, it was in crude armor. Each day, the burden grew heavier. Each day, more boys vanished. By the end of the first week, 15 of us remained. And though the numbers shrank, those left behind were changing. The gruel, the air, the constant strain, they forged our bodies into something new. Muscles thickened, lungs adapted, reflexes sharpened. And this was only the beginning. By the second week, combat training began. Not with the holy weapons of the Astartes, but with wooden staves and our bare hands. Crastus and his fellow instructors taught us the doctrine of the Imperium's warriors: brutal, efficient, merciless. Every move was designed to kill quickly, decisively. We fought each other day after day, bruises piling on bruises, bones cracking under the strain. There were no friends, no bonds. Compassion was stripped from us, beaten out alongside weakness. I took a strange pride in my performance. My years in the underhive had taught me the ruthlessness and stamina this training demanded. Yet even I was humbled, day after day, by the instructors. They moved like predators, faster, stronger, and more precise than anything human. Their corrections left us bruised and bleeding, but also sharper. Our bodies were being rebuilt through pain. But it was our minds that mattered most to the chapter. By the third week, the real reshaping began. We were marched into a lightless chamber and strapped into cold metal thrones. Needles pierced our skulls, plugging directly into our nervous systems. Then the vision started. They didn't come through our eyes or ears, but straight into our thoughts, drowning us in a torrent of knowledge and doctrine. The history of the Imperium, the Emperor's endless sacrifice, the betrayals of alien, mutant, and heretic, battle tactics, weapon schematics, prayers of hate and devotion. All of it poured in without pause, eroding what little of ourselves remained. Hours passed like minutes. We would emerge shaking, our identities worn thinner each time. Knowledge without understanding is useless, Brother Chaplain Mordith told us once. Understanding without faith is deadly. You will know, you will understand, you will believe, or you will die. Mordith was a vision of death himself, armor black as night, a skull-faced helm, and a Crozius that spat arcs of lethal energy. He never spoke of the Emperor's love, only his judgment. Not of glory, but of duty. Not of victory, but of sacrifice. You think you suffer? He asked once, pacing before us as we knelt in the chapter's chapel. You know nothing of suffering. The Emperor sits upon the golden throne, his body withered and rotting, sustained by the sacrifice of 1,000 souls each day. For 10,000 years he has endured that torment without pause, without relief. And you think your pain matters? By the end of the first month, only 10 of us remained. We were no longer simply human, but not yet what the chapter intended us to be. Our bodies had hardened, our minds were filled with imperial truth, our spirits hammered into shape. We were ready for the next stage. The surgeries began in the Apothecarion, a cavernous medical vault deep within the fortress. Apothecary Vaughn and his team worked like craftsmen at a forge, not doctors at an operating table. We were taken in sequence. I was third. I watched the first aspirant carried out after hours on the table, unconscious but changed, his chest newly scarred, machines monitoring the alien organ now beating inside him. The second did not come back alive. A chapter serf dragged the body away in a bag. There were no explanations, no mourning. Waste was not tolerated. When my turn came, I was stripped and scrubbed with burning antiseptic. They strapped me down, awake but paralyzed as the drugs flooded my veins. I could not move, but I could feel everything. Vaughn approached with a scalpel, his augmetic eye whirring as it focused on my chest. The secondary heart, he said clinically. The first of many gifts you will receive, if your body accepts it. The pain that followed was indescribable. I felt every incision, every intrusion as they shifted my organs to make room for something that should never have been there. The gift was a lump of grown tissue from the chapter's gene seed stock, a second heart that would, if I survived, One day matched the first, pumping blood enough for the body of a demigod. Through the haze of agony, Brother Chaplain Mordith stood beside the table, murmuring litanies of endurance and strength. Whether they were meant to steady me or were merely ritual, I couldn't tell. I wanted to scream, but couldn't. I wanted to lose consciousness, but was denied even that small escape. When it was finally over, they wheeled me into recovery, where another survivor lay. Our eyes met, and in his gaze, I recognized the same thing. I felt a violation so deep it was impossible to put into words. We had been promised that our bodies would be remade. Only now did I truly understand. To build something new, we first had to be broken. Recovery stretched into weeks. My second heart slowly began to fuse with my body, fighting me every step of the way. The pain never really ended. It only shifted, moving from one place to another as my system learned to tolerate the alien organ. Blood was drawn daily, treatments adjusted, drugs pumped in. I existed in a half-conscious blur, floating between agony and exhaustion. Once the heart had taken hold, the next stage began. They implanted the osmodula at the base of my skull, and soon my very bones started to change. They thickened, hardened, stretching skin and pulling muscle as if my body was being rebuilt from the inside out. The sensation was unbearable, like growing pains magnified to a grotesque scale. The new organs came in sequence. The Biscopia boosted muscle growth until my frame swelled beyond anything natural. The hemostamin rewired my blood chemistry, making me heal faster and carry more oxygen. The Laramin's organs sat beside my heart, flooding me with cells that sealed wounds almost instantly. Each implantation was followed by fresh weeks of torment. The training adjusted to test whatever enhancements had taken root. We grew taller, stronger, faster. Our senses sharpened. Our reflexes became frightening. With each procedure, we moved further from being human and closer to what the chapter desired. Something greater, something other. Not all of us survived the process. 2 aspirants died when their bodies rejected the catalepsian node, the device that allowed us to rest half our brains while the other half stayed awake. Another was crippled when the Preomna implant, designed to neutralize poisons, failed catastrophically. He was carried away, not to glory but to servitude, perhaps as a menial worker, more likely as a mindless servitor. Meanwhile, the regimen only grew harsher. Physical training pushed our new bodies to their limits, while combat drills now included real weapons scaled to our growing size. The indoctrination deepened, filling our minds with the chapter's tactics, rituals, and the endless details of maintaining war gear. It wasn't just training anymore, it was programming. Our thoughts were reshaped, not erased, but channeled into strategy, obedience, and war. By the 6th month, only 5 of us remained out of the 30 who had started. Each of us had endured most of the foundational implants. We were already far beyond ordinary men. Our strength, size, and stamina would have seemed godlike to those we once knew. But still, we were not yet space marines. We were neophytes, and the final trial stood before us. That trial would be fire. We were taken to a death world, 50 light years from the chapter's fortress. A strike cruiser carried us there, each sealed into an individual drop pod. In the ship's armory, Brother Sergeant Crastus addressed us as our new scout armor was fitted for the first time. The black carapace beneath our skin linked with the armor, making man and machine one. "You will be deployed alone," he told us, checking the seals on my chest plate. "Each of you has a designated extraction point 50 kilometers from where you land. You have 3 days to reach it." The chapter's instructions had been brutally clear. The planet teemed with hostile life. Survival was not the only measure of success. Crastus's briefing still echoed in my head. This is not merely a survival exercise. It is reconnaissance. The chapter requires data. Our weapons were meager: a bolt pistol with 3 magazines, a combat blade, and a slate with only the most basic navigation functions. The weight of the pistol felt reassuring in my hand, yet I knew that 3 magazines meant only 72 bolts. A finite number. Death would not run out of teeth so easily. The drop pod was a coffin of steel and gel. As the door sealed shut, the silence was suffocating. In the hive, there had always been the press of bodies. In the fortress monastery, the chapter's presence was constant. But here, bound in metal and about to be hurled at a hostile world, I felt isolation as sharp and absolute as a blade. The descent was violence incarnate. G-forces slammed against my reinforced bones. The pod shuddered and screamed as it burned through atmosphere, the interior heating until every breath scalded. Then the crash, brutal, bone-jarring, followed by the surge of cushioning gel that filled the compartment, keeping me alive where an ordinary man would have been pulped. For long moments I floated in it, my modified lungs dragging air from the oxygenated fluid. Then came the explosive bolts. The pod burst open, the gel draining away, and I staggered onto alien soil for the first time in my life. The world that greeted me was savage. Colossal trees loomed, their blackened trunks vanishing into a canopy that choked the light of a cold, blue-white sun. The air was heavy, wet, and stank of rot. Alien cries and insectal clicks echoed from every direction, the constant churn of things feeding and being fed upon. Training took over. I checked my gear methodically, holstering the pistol, sheathing the knife, ensuring the slate was operational. The coordinates glowed back at me. Extraction, 48 kilometers distant. 3 days. 16 kilometers per day, across a world that wanted me dead. A human would have no chance. But I was no longer human. I set off at a loping stride, the ground vanishing beneath me as my altered muscles and twin hearts carried me forward. Even in armor, I could maintain this pace for hours. Still, the world did not wait long to test me. The first predator struck 3 hours into my march. It came from the underbrush in a blur of muscle and scales. A quadruped that was also somehow a hexapod. Its body caught in the grip of evolutionary indecision. Its jaws opened wide enough to take my leg whole. But my reflexes, sharpened by months of drills and gene-forged nerves, moved faster. The combat knife punched into its throat before it could close its maw. Black ichor erupted, hissing and bubbling against my armor. The beast convulsed, then collapsed in the mud. I stood over it, listening to the forest go quiet around me, then resumed breathing in time with my hearts. Training demanded more than survival. I drew the data slate and began recording. Body structure, hide resilience, acidic blood, a resource for the chapter, or a danger to be purged. This was the true test, not just to live, but to serve, even alone, even on a world that wanted nothing but my death. And the forest was already closing in again.